It is my pleasure now to introduce our second speaker, Ms. Elyse Peterson. She, after graduating with a degree in food science, earned a Japan-focused MBA at the University of Hawaii. During that time, she spent 4 months on an internship on a tea farm in Kyoto. She's worked as a quality assurance supervisor for the United States branch of Itoen, who is one of the sponsors of our symposium. And she is the CEO and founder of Tealet. It's my understanding that it's a kind of international online farmers market connecting independent tea growers with their potential buyers, but I'm sure she's going to tell us more about that. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Elyse Peterson.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me here to speak with you today about my work. It does mean a lot. I've been working really hard, but I got to be honest, I'm really new to tea relative to most experts that can talk on this level. I've really only been working with tea for about 10 years, so I'm really new. My journey started not through tea, but through food. I'm pretty much obsessed with food ever since I was a kid. I loved to cook for people and see the satisfaction that they would have from being provided sustenance and all the connections that came through food. So that obsession led me to becoming a food scientist and then working in the food industry. My advisor says, oh, you like cooking for people? Well, become a food scientist and you can cook for millions of people. So I did it and found out very quickly that's actually not the case in our current Western food system, and was very heartbroken by that. Even getting jobs in the organic sector, I just couldn't find something that was satisfying, so I ended up joining the Peace Corps. And this is where I found my satisfaction finally. Despite all the poverty and hunger, literal hunger season happening every year when I was there, people were still really so well adjusted and balanced and happy. The education level was 0, literacy was 0, but they were in touch with what happiness was, and that was a big part food. And I love this photo, and this is, a very simple photo, but I feel like it sums up what's really important in food and what I've learned in my journey, which is the connection of knowing exactly where it's coming from. And there's no better way knowing it than when you're forced to have to produce all of it yourself. So I took that inspiration back to my career as a food scientist with the intention of inspiring a connection to be formed, inspiring this consciousness of this connection to be respected by the food industry. And so that meant I had a very high standard of who I would work for, which companies I would work for, and that's actually how I ended up working for Itoen. And working with tea. So that was actually my first experience working with tea. And I gotta say, this is funny, the 2 years that I worked at this company, I was their quality control supervisor, I never knew what Camellia sinensis was. I was actually really shamed that it took, leaving that job. And actually, during my MBA, I did a market feasibility study for Hawaii-grown tea. And that's actually where I learned about Camellia sinensis and learned about really how amazing tea is. So I'm grateful for all these experiences, and they've all kind of led me onto my current mission now. It's like everything culminating, perfectly aligning to what I'm doing now, and I'm grateful to tea for that. But ultimately, this all comes back to agriculture, and tea is agriculture, and I find it really awesome that America's tea culture is really embracing that concept that tea is not only a cultural, artistic product that is convenient or is something nice to serve, but it's an actual agriculture product that requires a lot of skill and care into producing. So other important things I learned on this journey, especially with my work in the Peace Corps, is that communication is really important. It's the most important. And communication is not just talking. So when I went to the Peace Corps, you know, top of my class, food scientist, had been working in the food industry. I thought I knew everything and that I was going to go to this village and save them. I was going to figure out all of the food processing needs they had, and we were going to make this huge food company there. And no, that didn't happen. And I was heartbroken over and over again when none of the projects that I was trying to force on them were working. And so yeah, I got fed up and I gave up. And I'm like, I'm a volunteer. I'm not getting paid to be here. I should just kick back and learn language and learn some recipes. So I did that, and it was amazing, and a project manifested just from sitting and listening to people. So, that's actually one of the most key lessons that I've learned in my journey that I still carry on to now, and even with the success of the business that I have grown, always try to remind myself about this, that the way to get things moving quickly and sustainably is through communication, not just talking, which, I know I'm talking to you guys today, but listening is also very important. And this all brings together collaboration and community. And we're all in this together. We're all stakeholders together, whether we know it or like it. So we got to find the way to connect and figure out how we can work together to create our mutually beneficial goals. And the backbone of all of this is transparency and trust and information. And prior to now, in our conventional business, global commodity network, transparency was void. So we're in a new age now where transparency is being given an opportunity, and we're seeing some results, and heck, I'm here now, which really proves a lot about the power of transparency. And so when we're talking about the sustainability and development for the tea industry, we can talk about the communication between tea growers, and we can talk about the communication between tea growers and tea vendors. But we also have to think about the communication with the market. And ultimately, what drives everything to happen, any decision to happen, any trend to happen, is where the market is and what the market wants. And I learned this when I first launched Tealet, the business I'm working on now, about 5.5 years ago. I, again, forced my idea of what I thought needed to happen onto the market. Social change needs to happen. Change needs to happen. So I made that the center of the marketing. And it was interesting. It got visibility. People were interested to read about this, but they didn't buy the product based off of this. No one bought anything. I'm like, why isn't anybody buying anything? This is like such a credible, worthwhile story. Why don't they want to buy into it? And it actually took me a couple of years to realize what they actually buy is quality. So kind of have to forget talking about that story and really focus on quality. And I'm really grateful to see that in several of the presentations so far, quality has been a central theme there, and it is extremely important. So now all of my work is focused on quality rather than the social change and the development work that I was used to in the past. So one of the big trends that has really pushed forward in sustainability of tea is direct trade. And I actually feel like it's a newer concept used in tea in maybe 2013, 2014. I had seen it being used in coffee often, the term direct trade. Coffee roasters would say, we know where these beans are coming from, this is good quality, it's sustainable, it's direct trade. So I started using this term in the tea industry and quickly started seeing several other tea companies, especially newer tea companies, when they would launch, were launched on this trend of direct trade. And now, by 2018, it is a major trend. You can't go to a tea festival without seeing direct trade written all over everybody's backdrops. So it's obviously become a trend, which is good. People are actually talking about tea as an agriculture product, talking about tea with the people behind it, rather than just a fancy branding and a convenient packaging. And the benefit of this movement of direct trade is that there has been small-scale change. some of the folks that we've heard in this seminar, Cooney with his matcha, he has made some small change, but really, businesses like mine and other direct trade businesses that are really doing authentic, good trade with these small family sustainable growers, we're only making a small impact so far. Like, Tealet might be one of the larger companies that's importing these types of teas into the US, but I'll be honest, I'm only moving like 10% of a farmer's product. That's not change. That's not the change I wanted to see. So, we have to look into, the benefits, but also wonder why is it only a small scale change that has happened versus a large scale change. And so the results of this is that, yeah, it did become a trend. And with every trend comes the opportunity to capitalize on the trend. And so now what's happened and what's already happened in coffee, and it's already been published, so this is a study here about the state and the perception of direct trade in the specialty coffee industry, is that the pioneers of direct trade coffee have actually abandoned the term direct trade. So you go to Intelligentsia, Stuptown's websites, you look at their marketing, they've taken direct trade out of all of their marketing because the term direct trade has lost its value because everybody is doing direct trade now. And there's no policing or enforcement of what direct trade means. So unfortunately, that's what's happened. And then for the authentic direct trade market, the guys that are really doing good work and importing really good quality tea from small family farms and paying a very good price from it and supporting those farms, we're all very fragmented, and we're all very small businesses doing our own thing. And when you have small businesses like that are doing international trade, there's a big problem here with logistics, right? So a big company, a big commodity tea company is moving the tea from these other countries into the US using a sea shipment, a container. Very cheap. I mean, we're talking less than $1 a kilo to move tea around the world in this method. But with these small fragmented businesses, we're all doing great business, but we can only buy at most 50 kilos, 100 kilos at a time. You can't put 100 kilos onto a sea shipment. You need to air freight it. And air freight, even if you've got a really good deal negotiated with FedEx or DHL, you're not going to get anything less than $7 a kilo for that. So that's what I mean by uncompetitive. Like, we're never going to be able, these direct trade or transparent tea vendors will never be able to compete on price with the commodity market. And ultimately, if we want to see the change, like a real economic opportunity for all of these hundreds and hundreds of thousands of small tea growers around the world, we need to be competitive. Like, that opportunity needs to be price competitive with the commodity market that we're up against. And so that's why I've taken the stance, along with several leaders in the specialty coffee movement, that direct trade is actually dead, and long live transparency. And ultimately, everybody says, it's the intentions of direct trade were awesome, just like the intentions of fair trade were awesome. So we look back at the intentions of that, and what was the intentions of that? The intentions was accountability of where things are coming from, and transparency, of course, being one. So now the focus is going back to transparency, which is ultimately information and exchanging that information and educating the consumer to care about that information, and not just accept something at face value. So, that's something that's happened with fair trade and the criticism with fair trade certification. Through Dr. Sen's presentation earlier, we kind of saw some of the downfalls of the mechanics of fair trade and what it actually is doing at origin. But in the market side, that's also very dangerous because people have learned to trust fair trade at face value. Several people, when I tell them the reality of fair trade, I can't believe how heartbroken they are. So I've actually told people the reality of fair trade, and they start crying because they feel so let down that this thing that they've been trusting for so long is not actually what they thought it was. So this idea of transparency and immense amount of information that they can consume if they like or not consume if they don't like, but just having that information there is what brings that trust versus, a logo on a seal that in reality corporate agriculture can essentially buy. You just buy it. And small tea growers that are struggling and trying to build up their communities cannot afford these certifications. It's a very pricey and administrative, lots of labor, as Dr. Sen had indicated, in getting these labels versus just doing really great, sustainable, progressive work in your community. And then this transparency in business being done clearly between the producer and the buyers, it equals more efficient business. So we're talking about less middlemen, essentially, less people. When international tea trade was being developed, those people were necessary. They needed to be there. They needed to facilitate the trade or the money transaction or the marketing translations or whatever role that they had developed over time. But with the internet and technology, a lot of those roles can be done by one person. I've been able to build it, with this very simple website, being able to handle all of those, including FDA compliance and quality control, being able to handle all of those functions just through one point. But changing to transparency is going to be hard. I mean, first of all, it's going to take each one of us as tea people or tea business people or whatever position we have in the tea world, a commitment to this transparency. And I know for a lot of people in the room that's not going to be hard. But for some others it may be a little difficult because it's against the status quo of how things have been working. But like I said, what changes things and what actually makes things happen is the market demand. If there's enough people buying it, then that's where business is going to go. So my philosophy on this is that this demand for changing to transparency needs to come from the market. So we need to empower the consumer to demand it. And that's increasing the demand for information. But first we have to let them know that the information is there. And we're already many steps into this process since I first started. When I first started in tea, especially with this business about 5-6 years ago, consumers didn't even know that information existed. I was a quality control supervisor at a leading tea manufacturer, and I didn't even know that information existed. So Facebook forums and blogs and articles and events like this are really important for letting people know that that information exists. So that's the first step. And so if any of y'all are involved in that process, thank you very much for playing your role. Now, the solutions that we're going to see mainly are going to be technology related when it comes to information exchange. The internet already exists, very well established. We're all on it. It's great. We're all using it. That's the first step. But the next step is something that, is probably very unclear for a lot of you guys, and I'd be more than happy to help try to clear it up for you, although I might not be successful. But there's this little thing called the blockchain that is the next frontier for technology information exchange. And this is my only joke in the entire presentation, so I hope you guys really enjoy it. So blockchain, I love it. Bitcoin, I named my dog after it. Can't love it enough. There's a lot of uses where blockchain can help, not just in the information exchange, but also in the efficiency of how business is done. And one of the most tangible things that we need to figure out next year is traceability for Fda requirements. And I'll give a little information on this because no one in the seminar has talked about it, but there's a new FDA regulation called the Food Safety Modernization Act. It's the most rigorous FDA regulation to be passed in over 70 years. And it's in place now. So that means that actually, if you have a tea company and you're just holding tea and repacking tea and selling tea, you have to have both HACCP and GMP programs as well as a commercial kitchen. The FDA doesn't audit tea companies very often, so don't worry, you probably won't get caught. But where is a problem for us is that imports. There's a foreign supplier verification process where all imports would have to be, including notification to the FDA that the import is coming. At point of import, there would also need to be a third-party audit verifying that the supplier in the other country also has a GMP HACCP program and equivalent US food safety standard. This is hard. If any of you guys have done tea travel, you would know this is hard. Even the most finest tea in China is being made in someone's backyard shack, with open air and breaking every single FDA GMP rule. So there's going to be a lot of difficulty in that, and also a lot of difficulty in traceability. So food companies will need to be able to trace back all of their food ingredients to origin. So this is a lot of information. This is an immense amount of information, and you go to any food technology seminar here, not just tea technology, but any food technology seminar, and I'm pretty sure there's a slide like this on everybody's presentation because everybody is looking to the blockchain. And I think it's appropriate for tea to become one of the first to utilize this technology because, tea was one of our first forms of currency, and now this is a new form of currency, which I think, is very appropriate for it to be associated together. And, other useful ways to use Bitcoin, which my business has already been doing for years now, since 2013, is for fast and affordable international payments. It's a big pain point, especially for this fragmented, authentic, transparent tea business that we have in the US. Everybody is doing these like micro payments, these small payments for small shipments of product going around the world. Banks, PayPal, they all want to charge. When I first started my company, I would keep track of payments and what fees were being charged. And I found out that through the banks and the PayPal, the average fee, like when I would send my money in US dollar and send it to the grower in Japan or into China or India, it's 12% chopped off the top. That's it's ridiculous. These farmers are already marginalized and struggling enough, and then the bank's just gonna, oh, that's mine. So we've been using Bitcoin, we've been managing networks of Bitcoin exchanges and moving the money across borders using Bitcoin. Of course, the farmer doesn't want Bitcoin. Actually, I work with Kuni, who just gave the presentation, and yesterday I just revealed to him that I've been paying him with Bitcoin the whole time we've been doing business together. He didn't even know. So that's how a lot of this innovation is going to be happening, is we just make it very easy and simple for these processes to happen while finding the efficiency. And yeah, through this Bitcoin method, we've been able to reduce those 12% fees to about 1.9%, which is world-changing. And then authenticating product. So when you're putting this information on the blockchain, anybody that's involved in this blockchain, hosting this network, has access to the ledger. The ledger is the record of all of the transactions that happen. They can be money transactions, but along with that money transaction, you can attach information, you can attach documents, you can attach certificates, authenticated information. So that means if you buy a really expensive, very valuable cake of pu'er and you want to be able to sell it 20 years down the line with some type of authentication, you could just reference back to this ledger. So there's a lot of potential in that as well. But ultimately, if we really want to promote sustainability in tea or in anything, it's ultimately just mindfulness of the interconnection between everything, and looking to the king of all of this interconnection, the one that never messes it up, is always there, nature. And emulate the processes that we can see in nature that are so in touch with this interconnectedness. And this is how we plant our tea, it's how we process our tea, it's how we market our tea, it's how we trade our tea, is just constantly having a mindfulness for this interconnection between everything. So that's my presentation. I'd like to thank you guys today, and I look forward to entertaining your questions after the panel is done. Thank you.